and welcome to the CET Experience session for how CET product is prioritized. My name is Eric Hinkle. I am a product owner here in the product department here at Configura. Product is where all of the features and functionality are created and maintained here at Configura, where the majority of our developers are employed. I've been with the company for about 10 years now, started out in another function, and I've been in the product function for about 2 years now. Here, it's probably best to go through a little bit of how Configura is structured as an organization. We make complicated software, make complicated software simple, but we also have a little bit of complexities to the structure of our organization. So let's go through some of those. Within Configura, we have our main product function. I just mentioned that in the introduction. But within product, that is where things like CET and Stage, Spec, and CIL and libraries, My Configura, Align, and CET developers, where these things are created and maintained. In addition to that, we have our technology department. Technology is where the majority of our R&D takes place. This is where architects live. This is where innovation generally is occurring. It's not exclusively where these things happen. Which again, this is why things get a little complicated here. Any function is not kind of exclusively one thing or the other, but generally that is what's going on there. And then from that point, we have another very large function for our organization. That's called the customer success function. Customer, in this sense, is our manufacturers. So this would be where we do most of our consulting and sales. And then this is where the support happens. This is where user support happens. So customer also in this case is user. And then in addition to that, we have all of our normal functions that an organization would have, like finance, marketing, IT, and HR. And we're here today to talk about how things get prioritized. And in order to do that, there's several key roles within the product organization that get involved with prioritization. Inside of our product organization, you have the role of the product manager. You have the role of the product owner. There's developers. There's QA. And there's UI UX designers. These are the primary roles that would exist within the development of software in our product function. There are really, though, two key roles involved with the prioritization and process of ongoing work. And the first of those is the product manager. So product manager, they're somebody who defines product strategy. They outline the long-term vision. They align the product with business goals and the market needs. They manage product lifestyle. They oversee the process from the development to the launch. They prioritize features. They work with stakeholders to ensure development focuses on the most valuable features. And their cross-functional leadership. They collaborate with engineering, design, marketing, and support teams constantly for the products that they are managing. Customer advocacy. They gather user feedback to refine and improve products continuously. In addition to that, we have the product owner role. Product owner, they manage the product backlog, prioritize and refine the backlog to ensure the team works on the most valuable tasks. They define the product vision, sets the product's long-term direction, aligning with business goals and user needs. They collaborate with stakeholders. They gather feedback from the stakeholders and translate into actionable work for the development team. They maximize product value, and they ensure the development team focuses on delivering features that bring the most value to the users and the business. They provide ongoing clarifications. They act as a main point of contact for the team, providing clear direction and answering questions throughout the development lifecycle. This slide here really kind of, I think, best represents, in my head at least, how this relationship works here. Especially at Configura. Inside Configura, we have about this many teams. I can't remember exactly how many are here, but about this many teams, and there's about this many product managers, and each team has a product owner involved with them. So there's this bi-directional collaboration that has to occur in order to effectively prioritize the right things here. You got one group who's kind of looking at it from a higher view and creating a higher level feature backlog for us to work from, and then another group who's focusing a little more on execution and getting it actually in the software and what it takes to do that.
Similar to the roles that exist within the product function, Configura's teams in product have a similar structure to them. That's good to be aware of. It's almost the same, but with an additional role. So starting out, we have the product owner. Um, then we have the role that is actually not part of our product department. These are the architect. The architect is part of our technology department, the R&D function. Then we have our Scrum Master. Scrum Master is the role that helps really keep the team organized, scheduled, accountable to deadlines, accountable to key points in time, and is really a key role in just the overall process of the software development within the team. Then you have the developers, QAs, and you have the UI UX designers. These typically every team has a variation or a person uh, completely dedicated to them uh, under this role. Configura's product teams are distributed globally throughout the world. We have, I think we have like 5 or 6 offices now. I'm actually not exactly sure, but our product teams are mainly based out of the three main offices. So, starting out, we of course have our headquarters in Sweden. This is where we have Team Lambda, Team Pi, Team Spectrum, Team Horizon, and our Rapid Response team. Then we have our Malaysian office, and this is we have the majority of our teams here: Team Fractals, Infinity, Team Prison, Team Tensor, Team Origin, and again Rapid Response. And you'll see a theme here with Rapid Response across all of our offices. And then you have our US-based office, and that's where we have Team Chaos, Team Radical, Team Operator, and then again more representation of Rapid Response. A little bit of background here: the teams all have a math themed name. So it was about, I'd say about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, that we kind of restructured into this team based structure. And we had a similar structure before that, but it was a bit more, it revolved a bit more around projects versus teams. And we found that teams owning particular domains definitely increased the quality of the output here when you had a consistent group of developers and people owning that part of the software. And so when those teams were made, we decided that they were all going to have some sort of math themed name. So as you see, every team here, with the exception of Rapid Response, which had a name previously already, and is kind of a specialized team, um, got a math themed name. And yeah, every one of them did, with the exception of Team. I guess there's a little bit of a stretch there. Team Horizon, which is a more of an R&D based team. I mentioned here, and this is worth noting, the rapid response team is a special team. Really, that's kind of our variation of DevOps. Um, this is a team that's their entire job is around the release and quality and stability of CET and the platform itself. So that's why they're spread across all offices, so they can be operating 24/7 or 24/5, I guess it is. they don't specifically have any real domains of ownership other than around release and quality, which is interesting, because every part of our software falls into a particular domain of ownership that falls then underneath the team in a PO. And the rapid response team does not have that. They handle, well, releases and the quality, and any big crises and hot fixes or first aids and all that stuff. So that's really our form of a DevOps team, and that's why it's distributed the way it is. Um, just to kind of a quick look at our internal SharePoint page. I thought this would just be kind of fun to show. This is the team page layout that an internal configure employee would see if they go to the product function within SharePoint, and then they can go down to the teams themselves and read a bit more about them internally so that people can understand what what domains these teams own and what they can help them with, how they funnel them issues, how they want to be interacted with, all that. As you can see, each one kind of came up with a cool logo of some kind that represents them. So a lot of them are AI generated at this point, I think, but it was this was a fun part of the process revamp we went under. I don't know, a year or two ago at this point now. Prioritization really though has to start with some understanding of how the overall software is planned. So it's going to take some time here to go through, the real high level guts of how software development planning occurs, um, and how Configura specifically does it. So the first thing that's good to kind of go through here is there's this age-old conflict within the software development. This has been going on since computers were invented. Where the developer, the people close to making the software, it's very important for them to maintain the ability to have flexibility and to account for changes and to not worry so much about those and to not let the deadline drive the quality of something. It's the doneness and the completeness of something that drives the quality of something and the release of something. And that's really at the heart of that is agile development. But that doesn't work great for leadership. Leadership always has, they need dates, they need some predictability, and that's understandable. It's a different world that leadership lives in than the development team lives in. So there's always been this conflict, and the traditional approach that satisfies leadership is like a waterfall planning approach, and you try and plan everything up front, and the deadline drives everything. And no matter what, if you're getting close to that deadline and something's not getting done, you cut it out or you work around it in some way, which inevitably reduces the quality of something. Um, where agile, if you learn something along the way, you account for it and you change, which generally extends out the timeline, and that frustrates people. It costs more money and all that. So it's good to understand why there's these weird why this conflict exists within the realm of planning for software development. And I actually fundamentally believe this exists everywhere. Everything can learn a little bit from an agile planning approach and methodology, and because it just in the end always results in a better quality output. Um, the good thing here is there's been the development of some hybrid approaches, that really help bridge the gap here. And so we've made use of a hybrid approach internally at Configura, and it's been tremendously successful at establishing predictability and visibility to leadership, and helping us accurately define our priorities that make it all the way down to the developer QAs that are leading these teams. Um, So yeah, I don't think I have any much more to say on that. The uh, the 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 slide here, I go through many of the high level uh, concepts that I just talked through just now. Why this is a problem historically and a problem in every organization. So on to that hybrid approach. It's called PI planning, and PI planning is is a form of an agile development that then also blends in some waterfall to it, for the sake of getting leadership um, leadership that view. So at the heart, it's agile. What is agile? Agile is the methodology that promotes iterative development. So you get a lot of customer collaboration, and you have a flexible response to change. It's very, very iterative. This is the very short iterations within our team here. We have a 2 week development window, to which at that end of that 2 weeks, we intend to have something in a build output. Um, some sort of build, not just in development, something that's been through at least some development testing, to something that we can then demo live and have an immediate impact on future work of that same nature in the subsequent sprint. So you can get feedback. Your feedback loop is very tight, and you can always account for uh, account for things that you didn't think of. So the overview of the agile process, it kind of fundamentally comes down to a handful of meetings here. First one is sprint planning. That's where we define the goals and the work for that sprint. A sprint being some chunk of work. We have a daily stand up every day, very short, 10 to 15 minutes, but where the whole team meets at least one time, synchronizes, and discusses the existing work they're working on. There's a set of questions that people are supposed to answer traditionally, but at the end of the day, it's a daily sync, and it doesn't last more than 10 to 15 minutes if you're doing it right. Then you have a sprint review. This is the end output demo, where you then demo for some group of people, and get their feedback. Within our team, we have actual users in our sprint demonstrations. So every 2 weeks, we have at least 2 users included, externally in our demonstrations, who provide immediate feedback to us as a team on what we're working on and what we maybe are getting right and getting wrong. Perhaps one of the most important is the sprint retrospective. This is one that can get overlooked very easily, but it's a opportunity to, as a team, reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, and make improvements. And it never stops. And it leads to, over time, an extremely streamlined approach. And you start to hone in on some of the silliest things, that you're, to optimize. But when you're at that point, it means that you're really getting everything else as efficiently as possible. And then refinement. Refinement is the point in time where we are refining the items to be worked on so that they're clear, they're properly prioritized, and they're ready to be picked up by a developer. And that's super, super, super key. So PI planning itself, and what is it? PI planning is a event that's going to happen at a larger iteration. So PI planning is a crucial event where teams align on the goals and they plan for that program increment. That's PI, program increment. Generally, it's about a quarter, so 8 to 12 weeks, and it ensures that you've got proper collaboration coordination for the delivery across all your teams. This becomes extremely powerful when you have, I think Configura has 13 product teams, 13 teams trying to align in the same direction. Um, the the old days where Configura had one product team, and it was easy for one product team to just go purely agile. You didn't have to have some large event where everybody gets aligned to make sure that now 13 teams. that's far too much work all at once to be organized with. So you got to have some kind of large event, and that's what this PI planning does. So the key elements of PI planning um, are these five things. You got the vision setting, the backlog prioritization, the team breakouts, and the program board review, and the draft and final plan review. We'll go into a little bit of this in the next slide. The key participants in the agenda for PI planning. This is essentially how it goes down. So every quarter, you're going to take basically 2 days and you're going to get your product owners, your scrum masters, and your development teams all aligned in together and ready to do this. And then the stakeholders, project managers, and other departments in conjunction with the product owners have crafted together the priorities for that team. And they're going to get together on day one and they're going to understand what's going on, what they need to work on, why. And then they're going to have a breakout where they plan exactly how they think they can do that work. Now, they only go so far within that planning. It's a very high level planning. You don't get real in deep. You're just doing some sanity checking here to make sure that is this doable within that set amount of time? How does it need to be potentially broken up? What are those potential steps that we need to make? How much time are each one of those steps going to potentially take? And that's about where you stop. Uh, from there, the teams will take it in their daily processes that I just previously described and put those things into the specific priorities needed in order to execute them. But in the PI planning, you kind of stop at that higher level where you can just, like, okay, I think we have this much capacity and we have this much to do and it can fit in. Day two, we present that plan to leadership and everybody discusses it as a team, resolves any potential conflicts, issues, all this. All along the way, any dependencies are being called out that would cause problem or be something that needs to be paid attention to, because that's the one of the biggest considerations when you're operating in this way is when team A is doing something that relies on team B, but maybe doesn't rely on it for 6 weeks, so they've got this window, or maybe it doesn't need it till the next PI increment. Who knows? It could be all kinds of different needs, but the dependencies are all there. You got to have them all mapped out, known, and paid attention to. And outside of that, we get three outputs. You get a team plan, you get a program board, and you get a confidence vote. Those are the three things. And I'll show some examples here of both. And the main thing here, though, is that, yeah, you have a board where everything is clear to leadership when and where it would be intended to be worked on and intended delivery dates. And that board is kept up to date throughout the progress of the PI. So if something was to change with that, the product owners are going to go back to that board, make sure it's updated, and that's just that one place where everybody has to see any update like that happen. The team itself gets a clear plan, so they know what they're working on. This was a common complaint we had amongst our teams previously, is that they were working in a way that they didn't really understand what they were working towards always, or they didn't they didn't see the full picture. Well, an event like this it helps greatly with developers in getting the full scope of what they're going to be working on and understanding it. So it really kind of builds that momentum for them to go into the development cycle and get it done. And you get this confidence vote. The confidence vote's a really great thing because in the end, everybody kind of gets to anonymously say how much they believe this is doable or not doable. And if the vote itself doesn't come to an agreement that this is possible, then things get pulled back and discussions are had. So I said I'd show you a couple examples here. We just did PI planning in, I don't know, it was a couple of weeks ago. Is an example output for the program board. This is the program board that was the result of our last PI planning event, which took place about 2 weeks ago. And you'll see here each column is one of those iterations. And so there's 6 iterations plus one additional IP iteration. The IP iteration is when we get to do our planning for the next program increment and really clean up any any additional work that just didn't quite get done. And we have a little bit of an opportunity to get things done there. And then each row is one of our teams. So the teams get broken down that way. And then they place their work here. And this is the main board that our leadership would monitor. We any changes or updates we as POs would be responsible to make those so that they are reflected here and visible to leadership. All the red lines you see here, well, actually, before I discuss those, the stuff in the bottom are additional dependency or additional teams outside of the product department that we could have potential dependency to. That's why those areas exist, so that type of relationship is clearly called out. So in regards to dependency, that's exactly what all these red lines are. Every red line you see is a team's dependency to another team and something they're working on. So in general, that's going to mean that, if I was to be looking at, say this one here and this one here, this is actually not a great situation because you've got dependencies that are aligned within the same iteration. That's not really a great thing. You got some risk going on there. Whereas, in this case here, you've got a dependency from this thing over to this, and that's farther separated. So this should be well polished off by the time the need for this is. Um, so dependency wise, this is one of the most important things for leadership themselves to be aware of, so that we can monitor those things, because the dependency is always a huge risk. Moving on. So I will give you a few more examples specific to my team that's here locally and our output from that last PI. So this is actually the team board or the team plan. So this is the specific output from Team Radical and what we intend to get accomplished in this program increment. In the next slide, I will actually go through the specific objectives here, but essentially each team will build a board. They'll define a capacity. So they'll say each iteration we have some capacity, whether it be hours or points or something. And in our case, we use a point system that kind of doesn't correlate to time, but it helps us with our data that we've had. We know how many points get done in over a certain amount of time, so we can predict that way, and that's how we will plan our capacity. Um, and then this is what we would present to the group in the end of the PI planning event. So for Team Radical, we ended up having a set of committed objectives and a set of uncommitted objectives. So we'll go through both of those here just so everybody can kind of see a real life example of what this is. Now, that said, this is our third time going through this type of planning. So PI planning is relatively new to us, actually fourth time, I apologize. Um, but this is something that has been very effective for us. We're getting better with it over time. And these objectives are actually one of those really difficult points, actually, like boiling something down to an objective that can be understood by technical, non-technical similarly. That's a little bit of a challenge. So hopefully we're doing better with what we had here. So first one, we want to deliver user betas for CET Essentials for flooring. We want to enable railroaded or rotated COM calculations
due to the change in fabric requirements and support manufacturer provided data for this feature. We want to finish all L1 facelifts. So in regards to this may need a little bit of explanation. I mean, all of them may need a little bit, but this one's very specifically. We've had our initiative over the last two releases now, where we've been facelifting the UI and CT. So part of this PI as a team is a certain areas that we own. We need to make sure get the proper facelift and facelift designs and facelift executions on them. And we break those down into three different levels: L1, L2, and L3. L3 being the most complex and L1 being the least complex. So that's what that objective is all about. This is a big one. We want to enable the insertion of special custom options in part data, such as COM, customer materials, to trigger upcharges and user input prompts for order details. This is really a step towards specials, and better supporting this at a core level where not every manufacturer would have their custom approach to how this type of data is captured. And then probably our biggest one, we want to develop a material quick editor dialog to streamline G-material creation from images. The editor will feature image import and visual previews, controls for rotation, scale, and transparency, and metadata fields with defaults. The dialog will also support editing and promoting materials via drag and drop, right click, and a button next to Material App. So this is tied to a lot of our COM initiatives right now that are going on. But one of the big things we want to do is we want to eliminate the repetitive systems out there. And one of the complaints we had regarding Material Explorer was it was a lot of clicks in order to get the same thing from an image that you get with the material dialog. So we are in essence trying to bring that functionality over into the Material Explorer area, so we make Material Lab a little bit easier to work with, essentially, and give you guys the ability to better structure a material to be ready for COM use or graded use. In our uncommitted, this is a little more back-endy for the manufacturers, but still very important for the user side and making sure things can seamlessly go between tools. We want to complete and refine the batch conversion tool and catalog creator to allow for conversion between DB3 XML catalogs and catalog CIF. That's a big one that we can achieve a lot of order alignment with. Our team specifically, we want to collaborate with Team Horizon to integrate a new cloud solution for manufacturers to upload material assets with Material Explorer, displaying and utilizing these assets. So Team Radical will be responsible for integrating the material library that we end up creating for material manufacturers into Material Explorer. And then lastly, we're going to clean up and consolidate background processes, communication, and in the commission. Excuse me. We're going to clean up and consolidate background process communication in the commercial interior libraries extension. This is a technical debt initiative, and typically those are going to fall under a different allocation for us, not really come up in PI planning, but this one's important enough for us that we really wanted it to be carved out, at least in PI planning to some degree, because it's going to lead to a lot of performance improvements within the CIL work and the ability to improve it further from there. So now we can finally get to probably what you guys care the most about here. And it's how does something actually get into the planning process? Who's responsible and how does it get there? And I think at this point you can kind of see something coming together. There's going to be a few key roles involved with this that are highly involved with that planning and backlog creation. But let's get going. So it all starts for PI planning within a team with the PI backlog. And that's what the team is going to be handed in order to prioritize their work for in that program increment. So the PI backlog represents a set of features, tasks, and priorities that the teams will work on during the program increment. It helps organize structure the work to ensure alignment with business goals. So this is a backlog that the leadership effectively is going to bring into the equation for PI planning and hand over to the teams. And each team is going to have certain features within that backlog that they're responsible for, and that's going to be what they start with their PI planning. So prioritization to that backlog. What influences it the most? Starting with business value. That's a big one. ROI on something. We have to anything we make's got to make money, right? We're a business. We're a for-profit organization. We're not a what is it? A nonprofit. Um, and so everything we make has to make some money, and that's not necessarily number one, but it's close. Probably number one, but you know. Customer feedback, and hopefully, I guess on the last one, hopefully a lot of that business value is tied to things that actually make you guys want to use the software. So hopefully a lot of these things overlap in a lot of ways. But yeah, but number two, actually number two, not necessarily number two, but just next, the customer feedback, and that's going to be a very broad definition for customer here. That's going to be basically anybody that we work with externally that kind of influences us. That's manufacturers, that's users, and partners. Partners being somebody who maybe creates utility extensions for the ecosystem, or somebody who works with a dev partner who builds manufacturer extensions because for smaller manufacturers. Okay, and next, internal functions. So internally, we talked about this earlier. We have especially the customer success department. You can see the majority of our internal functions that are influencing prioritization outside of product, it's customer success. So that's going to be support. What are they seeing? That's a big one. What support has ties to product in so many different ways. But training, that's another big one. That's a group of people who really knows the user base and what the CI world is doing. Our consulting area, and that's the department that's building extensions for manufacturers. They also have a lot of potential input on prioritization. Sales, that ties to that business value side over there. Some of that's what do we need in order to sell more. QA potentially, what do they need in order to get their job or do more with less people. And then there's kind of a remaining bunch that affect it in a variety of complicated ways, but they're definitely important. That's dependencies. So we talked about that earlier. The team dependency, right? If team A is relying on team B for doing something, they need to wait on team B, and team B may not be able to get to it until PI2, which means team A can't start until PI3. But then you got team capacity, and that's another big one, right? You never have enough on the team to get everything done, whether it's developers, QAs, UI, UX, architects, product owners. They're all at capacity always, every organization, but especially Configura. We're all trying to get as much as we can with what we can. And then the technical feasibility. It's not uncommon for a lot of these things that come forward, and it's like, whoa, this is a great idea, but we're talking about 5 years of R&D work to get that done, and then that really shifts the prioritization of that work because, right? Because can everybody wait 5 years for this thing? Or is it important enough to where we need to think about it in that way? And it falls on both sides of the table sometimes. It just depends. So next, we can talk about some of the prioritization techniques. Like there's some level of prioritization that's always going to come down to a gut instinct, I guess is the best way to say it, right? Because you're going to have different complicated factors that drive it. Maybe somebody's dangling a big check in front of us. Maybe somebody's threatening to leave the platform, or some other factor has occurred that we need to react to. So there's going to be a lot of things that influence prioritization that aren't as mathematical. But there always does come time where, well, initially and in the situations when you're deal breaking, kind of, where there's stalemate, conflict, where you need to have some sort of mathematical calculation that says here is what higher is a higher priority. And there's a variety of techniques for this. I'm not deeply familiar with these, so I'm mostly familiar with the one that we use, which is weighted shortest job first. This is a technique where dividing the cost of the delay by the job size gives you a value that then you can use to prioritize on. So you calculate it through this fairly simple-ish, equation here, right? Cost of delay and job size, right? But what are those things? Well, that's where things can get a little more complicated, right? So the cost of delay, this is how much value you lose by delaying a task. The higher the cost of delay, the more urgent the task is. It includes things like business value, time sensitivity, risk reduction, opportunity enablement. And then the job size. This is the effort or complexity of the task. How long did it take? This is easier to come to a numerical value for, right? So this is something that you can at least you can get a little better value. The above here can be a little trickier to assign a numerical value to. Why do we use this? That might be a good question, right? So, like I said, there's going to be first off the initial prioritization of any backlog, right? Some order needs to be established that comes from a relatively consistent approach. Beyond that, though, you're going to have times where the parties responsible for this type of prioritization don't agree, or maybe they equally disagree. In which case, who's right, right? And that's where you got to use something like this, something that actually is a little more definitive, black and white, and that says this is the calculated result. Right or wrong, whether it's truly right or wrong, that's up for debate, right? But it is a correct calculation based on the decided prioritization needs for the organization, if we're in that situation. So, and then again, the why, it helps us focus. And fundamentally, it's going to help you focus on the most valuable task that we completed quickly. Um, so, in a lot of ways, that's um, the low hanging fruit, I guess, so to say. Um, so we talked about weighted shortest job first, but still fundamentally, prioritization is going to come down to stuff like this right here, the cross-functional collaboration. This is where the people creating that backlog are working and discussing and talking enough with the variety of impacted parties, including external, to ensure that they understand and can justify where the priority of something is landing. So that's the teams themselves. You have the teams that are going to have their own independent priorities and opinions on them. The product owners, those are going to interact a lot with people. And then stakeholders, they collaborate to refine this backlog and ensure that they all agree that the highest priority, highest value work is being prioritized. This flow kind of starts with product managers. That's really where they kind of this is the brunt of their work, is in the communication and understanding of what's needed and the setting of it within that PI backlog, right? So the product manager comes in and they set those PI backlogs in collaboration with the product teams. So that's why these arrows are kind of bidirectional in this case, because in the end, that PI backlog is a centralized thing that is the output of both groups of people, but they do operate independently on them at different times, and they view them a little differently, each one. And each product team is made up of the roles previously discussed. So you got a product owner who primarily is the one who's representing the product team with that product manager in the backlog discussions. But it is at times the entire team. So now
Here's the big one. And unfortunately, if you're watching this, you're not in person. I'm going to open this up to a little more discussion, I think, within, well, the whole thing will be open up to discussion in person. But the challenges could be an interesting topic here to discuss. Um, the challenges with prioritization. What is it that makes prioritization difficult? And I'm sure there's some expected things here, right? But first off, we got competing priorities. Like so, different stakeholders have different priorities, or they have different business goals, right? Or they have different things motivating their business goals, right? And this makes it impossible to align on what can be prioritized. So that's where, as I said earlier, we have some sort of, in this case, framework, um, weighted shortest job first, and that ensures that if we find that situation that there's a clear winner due to something we've all agreed is our tiebreaker, right? Then similarly, but not quite the same, you still got lack of stakeholder alignment, right? You got people who just fundamentally might be unaligned. And that's a little bigger than I got this and I got this and which one's more important, right? This is more like somebody's like, I don't think we should do this, and they're saying, yes, we really should do this. And how do you resolve that? And it's tricky. And that's why I say this is the work of this is why that backlog and prioritization is the main branch of work that the PDMs do. They understand. They try to understand those things as best they can, and they can resolve those potential disagreements as best amongst that small group. This is the biggest one that frustrates the development team: unclear or shifting requirements. This is so common to happen, and it happens in just about every PI to some team. It's I don't want to necessarily say it's impossible to prevent, but it's very, very difficult to prevent this. Um, especially in software. Software development's got this really interesting point where we're experts in software coding and how computers work, right? We may not be experts in office furniture. We may not be experts in whatever it is that we're having to build something around. And so we have to become those experts in order to do that. And that takes time. That really takes time. And so that's a thing that contributes to this. And sometimes people don't have all there. I mean, this is experienced on the other side with organizations. Sometimes they have people who get tasked with build this thing. We need X, and the X is a little unclear to them even. And so that, they just know they need this tool, and they need this tool because they sell more, right? But then X is needed and nobody really knows what X is. And so the requirements can get really weird. That can happen a lot in the consulting side. But even on the product side, I can cite situations with COM work with this where this was very difficult because COM is very unique from manufacturer to manufacturer. It has a lot of complicated factors influencing it, and a lot of weird needs and legacy stuff that comes along with it, right? So in doing that, we've seen shifting requirements as we've progressed through our own phases of that work. Um, so yeah, big challenge in prioritization. Dependency between teams. This one's obvious, right? Or at least obvious to me. Sorry, maybe it's not obvious to everybody, but when one team needs to wait on another team in order to work on something, inevitably you've got it. That's a sequential set of events that's happening, and that means they can't occur at the same time. So that takes that timeline out, which can be a really big challenge, right? You might have something. I'd actually say this is directly related to one of the hardest things we have at the top of our priority list, and that's the legacy discontinuations. The dependency between teams is really one of the big things there, but as well as amongst other things. But there's very little we can do yet until some other teams establish other baselines that are available to us, and then there's dependency across external teams to that work that will make it tricky. So while that thing is at the top of our priority list as an organization, it's one of the most difficult to get much done quickly because of how
complicated it is and how much dependency there is. And this one, capacity. Capacity is always a challenge. You can't ever have enough capacity, and so this is just the issue with you do what you can with what you have, and you gotta snip out the remaining part and get it done in the next increment. Equally important as the process are the tools used for the process. And then you're going to find a variety of tools out in the world that help with software development in a number of ways. And these are kind of the three main ones, at least from a planning perspective, that we use and take advantage of. PI planning currently still is used primarily uses Miro, the boards in Miro, in order to map out and create those boards. The execution of the work and the true backbone of the daily work is Jira. Jira itself is what we use every day for a lot of stuff. And every issue that's created from the start to release to the discussions in between, it's all within a Jira ticket. So very, very, very critical piece of our infrastructure. And then Productboard. This one's relatively new. New as in like a year and a half too. But this is really the source of our external roadmap now. This is how we collect feedback from the users the best way. It's been really, really effective in doing so. So that those links that you go to on our own website to submit feedback, those are going to funnel into here. And this helps expose it to the right audience so that those desires, those requests are being seen by the people who can best affect their development. Um, and so Productboard is really, really, really powerful in that one. And specifically the roadmap again, roadmap.configura.com. I'm not going to pull it up here right now, but please visit that. This is the single most effective way a user can influence our prioritization. We genuinely look at every single submission that comes through here. Leadership is reading those daily. Product owners, product managers are in these constantly. We'll even reach out to people occasionally if we have additional questions. This can organize it in a way so that we know, your dealership brought forward all these types of feedbacks and all that. And this is really, really helpful in us establishing what to work on. Because the single most powerful thing that gives weight to what to work on is a user vote. I want this. That is what tells us the most. It doesn't matter at all what product manager wants or needs. If every user votes for this thing and wants this thing to be worked on, that's what's going to get worked on. So one might be asking themselves at this point, Eric, what about all the stuff I send in? I talk to support all the time. I see issues all the time. I see issues that get fixed. I see issues that never get fixed. None of what you talked about just now tells me anything about that. And you're right. None of it did. Because none of that part of the planning is how we really handle those aspects of our work. So what about the bug reports? Where do those go? How do those get handled? So it'd be interesting to go through that real quick. Also, we'll plan to open this up for discussion in person. In the end, work gets kind of lumped into one of two buckets. You have your bucket of the stuff that we just talked about, and that's really what we call new initiative work. That's the work that's not done. It's all new to the platform. That's stuff that's needed and what we plan to add. But then you have all the rest of the stuff, and really we lump all of that into this bucket. It's called maintenance. Maintenance work refers to ongoing tasks necessary to keep the systems and applications and infrastructure running smoothly. This is not limited to bug fixes, minor enhancements, performance improvements, technical debt. So you saw earlier, I mentioned earlier that we were addressing some technical debt within the commercial material libraries extension. In the end,
Majority of technical debt is going to be addressed through maintenance, unless it bubbles up to a point that it becomes that urgent. Um, and there's always a constant need to address technical debt. That in itself, I've done a whole presentation on technical debt for an hour before, and that's a whole conversation, and it's in and of itself. Real quick, this is a little glimpse of our process flow for incoming tickets. So, as we have a process for planning new stuff and a place where users can submit it and all that. Um, this is our high level process flow, which really is about making sure that we can verify and have all the information necessary in order to, and it's what this says right here, get this into a team's backlog. And so I can't remember exactly how long ago. I would say about 2 years ago was that we implemented this newer team structure where teams own things, and that's what this process is about. In order to get it to the proper owner of that thing, so that it can get fixed. So PI planning and maintenance. I mentioned like this is your work comes in one or two things. How does PI planning fit into this? Well, all teams don't get planned at full capacity. So let's take my team for example. We generally use 100 points as our capacity. That's our capacity. And a point means something for us, but that doesn't matter for this part of the conversation. Generally, we are only going to plan up to some point that me and my primary product manager have agreed on. So the product owner, and in my case, Rob Dietrich, the product manager for Team Radical, we meet and we agree with our Scrum Master as well on a maintenance ratio. Typically, it's around 50-50. It can go up or down 60-40, 70-30, 30-70, who knows what. There are teams that maybe have exclusively maintenance or exclusively new to work. It's not that common, but it does happen. Typically for Team Radical, we sit around 50-50. And so we plan about 50% of our time to be initiative work, and we don't plan the other 50% of our time. And we expect that we're going to need to address issues that are coming in from the users. All right. So how do we get those? Well, that's the team incoming board. All right. So our team incoming, that's a board where the QA and the PO, myself, we monitor that board for the team. Issues coming in from support, that's where they get escalated to. And depending on the priority that's set on that issue, that will determine the time expectations for a response. So let's take blocking for example, right? We are going to pick up blocking issues more or less within hours of it being logged to our board. We have notifications in place to let us know about these as they come in, because in the end, we would like a blocking issue to go out the door as soon as possible for a fix. And as soon as possible still means it has to go through quite a bit of process to make sure it's safe for you guys. So that process can take some time, and that means that the fix has to be picked up almost immediately. Whereas a low or lowest priority, that's something that, it might be annoying, but probably has a workaround. And so, we may be looking at as long as a month, 2 months for something like that might get the answers that necessary, because there's quite a bit of issues coming in. But and in this board, that is where we're going to do verification, and the verified issues just move straight into the refinement process for the team. So on our side, anytime we get one of these issues and it's high enough priority, we verify it. The QA and the PO agree that this is something we want in our team's backlog, and we push it directly into the queue of issues that we work through in every one of our refinement meetings. And so that means that unless it's, depending on its priority again, assuming that it's probably medium priority or lower, that it would be getting refined and scheduled for work within about 2 weeks. Scheduled for work meaning it might be scheduled for a release, 2 releases from now, but it's at least reviewed and refined and estimated and placed in a bucket. So, and with that,
that's all. I'll open this up for questions in person. If you have any specific questions, feel free to reach out and ask those to me. My email is open to anybody. I'm happy to have discussions about this and answer any questions or even receive feedback necessary on what you think about this. And thank you very much for your time today. Hope you enjoyed.